All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the increasingly blurred lines between Hollywood and Washington, D.C., specifically by looking at Donald Trump's high-profile celebrity feuds. Now, you might be thinking this is just tabloid gossip, but it's actually so much more than that. What we're really looking at is a fundamental shift in how American politics operates at its core. When mass entertainment collides with high-stakes politics, it creates a totally new playbook for how political discourse is shaped and ultimately how public perception is influenced.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, Hollywood versus DC. Second, the horror author's warning. Third, the reality TV rivalry. Fourth, the visceral protest. And finally, influencing public perception.
Section 1. Hollywood versus DC. The showman and politics.
So let's start with the unique dynamic that really set the stage for all of this. We're talking about the unprecedented scenario of a former reality TV star entering the political arena. He brought absolute show business sensibilities right into presidential discourse. And because of this, the very definition of political discourse has fundamentally shifted. We're seeing a complete merging of serious policy debates with personal entertainment drama. Think about how you probably consume news today. Instead of reading dry, academic policy papers, the electorate is often digesting really complex political issues through the lens of character drama, public feuds, and viral moments. It completely changes how we engage with and how we ultimately judge our leaders.
Moving on to Section 2. The horror author's warning. Enter Stephen King.
King frames his opposition entirely through the lens of fear. He famously posed a question to the public, "Do you think that the Trump presidency is scarier than a Stephen King novel?" To which he immediately answered, "Short answer to that is yes, I do." If we look a little closer at this, it's a highly calculated tactic. King is using his massive cultural authority as the undisputed master of horror to validate the political anxieties of his audience. He's literally translating abstract political concern into the visceral, storytelling emotion of fear, something his loyal readers deeply intuitively understand.
But King's opposition went way beyond just rhetorical warnings. He took specific, multi-layered actions to distance himself and his work from the political figure. The source material notes that their social media feud got so heated they actually blocked each other. But King took it a step further, banning the then-president from even watching his film adaptations. This gives us a fascinating insight into the modern era. Intellectual property is literally being used as a political weapon. King effectively weaponized his own art and cultural accessibility to make a definitive statement.
Which brings us to a very specific number, 34. Recently, King doubled down on his criticism by reacting almost instantly to the news that Trump was found guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records. King used his massive digital platform to explicitly label the Republican presidential candidate a convicted felon. It just goes to show how quickly cultural figures can capitalize on the legal system's findings to instantly rebrand a political opponent in the public eye, basically cementing a new narrative before the traditional news cycle even settles.
All right, Section 3, the reality TV rivalry. And yep, we are talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Our next case study involves a clash that is deeply rooted in ego, television ratings, and the entertainment industry itself. When Arnold Schwarzenegger took over hosting The Celebrity Apprentice, Trump publicly mocked the show's new ratings, claiming they went right down the tubes. Arnold quickly countered with a video message suggesting they just switched jobs, since Trump was clearly such an expert in TV ratings, adding that if Arnold took over the presidency, people could finally sleep comfortably again. Just take a moment to appreciate the sheer absurdity of this. We have two incredibly powerful political figures, a former president and a former governor, using their massive platforms to publicly argue over Nielsen television metrics.
But this rivalry didn't just stay as friendly TV banter. Schwarzenegger has been incredibly blunt about his assessment of Trump's political legacy, explicitly calling him a failed leader and stating he will go down in history as the worst president ever. The source even knows Arnold strongly hopes he will not make a return to politics. What makes this critique so unique is Schwarzenegger's position as a fellow Republican and a former politician. This isn't just a critique from the Hollywood elite. It's a direct attack coming from inside the political house, which gives his words an entirely different kind of weight.
Section 4. The visceral protest. Featuring Robert De Niro. Of all the celebrity critics detailed in the source material, Robert De Niro's approach is definitely the most visceral, aggressive, and street level. He has consistently focused his attacks on the concept of truth, specifically highlighting his claim that the former president lied more than 30,000 times during his 4 years in office. He uses this massive number as a deliberate tactic to overwhelm the listener with sheer scale, basically portraying the political opponent not just as someone you simply disagree with, but as an active, existential threat to objective reality itself.
De Niro pulls absolutely no punches. He's called him a punk, a dog, a pig, and a mutt. He even publicly stated that the former president thinks he's a gangster, but isn't even a good one. If we look at this as a political tactic, we can clearly see that De Niro is deliberately stripping away all traditional political decorum. By using deeply personal insults and classic mob movie vernacular, De Niro is attempting to drag the discourse right down to the street level, attacking Trump directly on his own tough guy terms.
And Trump, executing his well-documented political strategy, never wastes a single moment to counterpunch. He immediately fired back, insulting De Niro's mental capacity, his physical stature, and calling him a broken-down fool. Trump's allies even joined in, suggesting De Niro only lashes out because he needs attention and hasn't made a good movie in a while. This is a classic tactic from Trump, instantly attempting to diminish his critics' professional relevance and personal credibility. He attacks the acting career and the physical stature to try and completely invalidate the underlying political critique.
Now, this feud is particularly noteworthy because De Niro actually escalated it from the television screen straight into the physical world. He literally staged a protest and delivered a speech right outside the courthouse during the former president's trial, calling him a clown. Think about that for a second. An 80-year-old Oscar winner taking to the streets outside a high-profile criminal trial. It perfectly illustrates how the traditional polite boundaries of celebrity endorsements have completely shattered. They've evolved into direct, on-the-ground activism meant to disrupt the daily news cycle.
So, we've seen the deeply personal insults, the blocked social media accounts, the arguments over TV ratings, and the physical protests outside courthouses. But it leads us to a pretty crucial question. Do these celebrity disputes actually influence the real world?
Which brings us to Section 5, Influencing Public Perception, the Macro Impact.
Let's zoom out for a minute to examine what political analysts and experts say about the tangible power of these massive Hollywood voices on the broader electorate. Trump himself argues that celebrity endorsements are completely irrelevant. He points out that he doesn't need huge stars to fill up arenas, asserting that his massive rally crowds are driven purely by his message. But it goes deeper than that. Trump actively uses Hollywood's rejection of him as a badge of honor. It's a core part of his populist appeal, proving to his base that he's the ultimate outsider fighting against the cultural elites.
However, experts cited in the source material counter that narrative. They argue that in a culture absolutely obsessed with entertainment, the public stances of major stars hold significant sway over public perception. But here's the key. It's not necessarily about changing minds, it's about mobilizing apathy. In our modern attention economy, celebrities hold the ultimate currency, which is attention itself. When figures with massive devoted fan bases decide to speak out on political issues, they use that concentrated attention to funnel millions of eyeballs directly toward the ballot box, turning cultural fandom into actual voter turnout.
To really illustrate this expert perspective, the source points to a modern comparison: Donald Trump's massive influence versus pop star Taylor Swift's footprint. The analysis suggests that right now, Swift's cultural popularity is so overwhelmingly large that her stances could profoundly impact elections, particularly since she actively encourages her fans to vote for Democrats. This is what we call a battle of cultural megaphones. It's a modern phenomenon where a pop star's tour dates and social media posts can completely rival or even eclipse the daily news cycle of a presidential candidate. This right here is the ultimate synthesis of Hollywood and DC.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. When our entertainers become political fighters, staging protests and issuing warnings, and our politicians act like entertainers, hyper-focused on ratings and crowd sizes, who truly holds the power to shape our country's future? Thank you so much for diving into this incredibly complex and fascinating dynamic with me today. Stay curious and keep asking the big questions.